Welcome back to the Oversight. My name is Rumon, and today we are diving into one of the most important geopolitical stories unfolding in the world right now. But in a story this fast-moving, I want you to think critically alongside me, because what just happened between Donald Trump, Xi Jinping, and the global energy market is not just a headline. It is the beginning of a new world order being written in crude oil, and most people have absolutely no idea it is happening. Here's what you missed. On the 14th of May, 2026, Donald Trump sat across from Chinese President Xi Jinping in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. It was the first time an American president had made a state visit to China since Trump himself went in 2017. Think about that. 9 years of frozen summits, trade wars, tariffs, chip bans, and Cold War rhetoric, and suddenly the two most powerful men on Earth are eating kung pao chicken together and making deals.
And within hours of that meeting, global crude oil benchmarks jumped. Brent crude futures for July surged over 3%. United States West Texas Intermediate climbed more than 2%, briefly crossing $103 a barrel. In the world of oil markets, that kind of single-day movement is seismic. And it happened because of 4 sentences Donald Trump said on Fox News. They've agreed they want to buy oil from the United States. They're going to go to Texas. We're going to start sending Chinese ships to Texas and to Louisiana and to Alaska. Trump then called China's energy appetite insatiable. Now, here is the thing that makes this moment extraordinary. It is not just about oil. It is about where oil fits in a world that is being restructured by war, sanctions, strategic rivalry, and the most dangerous geopolitical standoff in the Middle East in modern history. To understand why that oil announcement moved markets so violently, you have to understand what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now. And to understand the Strait of Hormuz, you have to understand how the Trump-Netanyahu alliance cracked. And that crack, I promise you, is the real story here. Right now, while you are watching this video, oil markets are moving in real time in a way that has not happened in years. And if you close this tab without hearing what I'm about to tell you, you will spend the next 6 months trying to catch up on the biggest geopolitical realignment of this decade. I want to be transparent with you from the start. I study these events carefully and I cross-reference everything I share with you against verified reporting, documented statements, and credible geopolitical analysis. But in a story this fast-moving, I want you to think critically alongside me. Because what just happened between Donald Trump, Xi Jinping, and the global energy market is not just a headline. It is the beginning of a new world order being written in crude oil, and most people have absolutely no idea it is happening. Here's what you missed. On the 14th of May, 2026, Donald Trump sat across from Chinese President Xi Jinping in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. It was the first time an American president had made a state visit to China since Trump himself went in 2017. Think about that. 9 years of frozen summits, trade wars, tariffs, chip bans, and Cold War rhetoric, and suddenly the two most powerful men on Earth are eating kung pao chicken together and making deals. And within hours of that meeting, global crude oil benchmarks jumped. Brent crude futures for July surged over 3%. United States West Texas Intermediate climbed more than 2%, briefly crossing $103 a barrel. In the world of oil markets, that kind of single-day movement is seismic, and it happened because of 4 sentences Donald Trump said on Fox News. They've agreed they want to buy oil from the United States. They're going to go to Texas. We're going to start sending Chinese ships to Texas and to Louisiana and to Alaska. Trump then called China's energy appetite insatiable. Now, here is the thing that makes this moment extraordinary. It is not just about oil. It is about where oil fits in a world that is being restructured by war, sanctions, strategic rivalry, and the most dangerous geopolitical standoff in the Middle East in modern history. To understand why that oil announcement moved markets so violently, you have to understand what is happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now. And to understand the Strait of Hormuz, you have to understand how the Trump-Netanyahu alliance cracked. And that crack, I promise you, is the real story here. Let's go back to the beginning of 2026. Benjamin Netanyahu had spent months lobbying Donald Trump for something enormous, a joint American-Israeli military strike on Iran, specifically targeting its leadership and its nuclear infrastructure. According to multiple verified reports, following high-level meetings in February, Trump authorized what was internally called Operation Epic Fury. The attacks were launched on the 28th of February 2026. They included targeted assassinations. They included massive aerial bombardment. The United States and Israel had gone to war against Iran together, and in that moment, Trump and Netanyahu appeared to be the most unified geopolitical partnership in the world. Two leaders, one mission, one enemy. But what happened next tore them apart. Iran did not collapse. Iran fought back. It launched counterstrikes against American military bases across the region. It struck Gulf states with missiles and drones. Kuwait, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates all reported incoming fire. Hapag-Lloyd, one of the world's largest shipping companies, had 4 vessels stranded in the Persian Gulf. And Iran did something that no one in Washington had fully prepared for. It closed the Strait of Hormuz. That narrow waterway, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, is a passage through which roughly 1/5 of the entire world's oil and gas supplies flow every single day. And Iran shut it down. The global economy began to shudder. Energy prices spiked. Supply chains fractured. Trump, who had promised Americans lower prices and economic relief, suddenly found himself presiding over a war that was doing the exact opposite. That is the moment the cracks in the Trump-Netanyahu alliance started to show. Because Trump and Netanyahu, it turns out, did not want the same thing from this war. They never did. Netanyahu's goal was total. He wanted Iran's enriched uranium stockpile destroyed or removed. He wanted Iran's nuclear enrichment sites dismantled. He wanted Iranian-backed proxy forces eliminated from Lebanon, from Yemen, from Iraq. He wanted, in his own words, to keep fighting until all of our objectives were achieved. He told CBS News this clearly. There are still nuclear material, enriched uranium, that has to be taken out of Iran. There are still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. And when Pakistan brokered a conditional ceasefire on the 7th of April 2026, Netanyahu immediately declared that the ceasefire was not the end of the military campaign and called it a stop on the way to achieving all of our objectives. His own diaspora affairs minister called the ceasefire a mistake. 63% of the Israeli public, according to a Hebrew University poll taken days later, opposed the ceasefire. Trump's goals were different, fundamentally different. Trump wanted a win that he could show the American people. He wanted oil prices down. He wanted the Strait of Hormuz open. He wanted a deal, any credible deal, that would allow him to declare victory, come home, and get back to the business of trade. My research suggests that the divergence between what Trump wanted and what Netanyahu wanted became impossible to paper over the moment Iran offered diplomatic flexibility in exchange for a halt of hostilities. Because every time Trump moved toward a ceasefire, Netanyahu moved toward escalation. Every time Trump gave diplomacy a window, Israel launched another wave of strikes, most critically in Lebanon, which Iran had insisted must be included in any ceasefire agreement. Here is the specific moment where the relationship broke down most publicly. When Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif announced the April 7th ceasefire and stated clearly that it covered all fronts, including Lebanon, Netanyahu's office immediately contradicted him. Netanyahu declared the ceasefire does not include Lebanon and sent Israeli jets to launch what observers described as the strongest wave of attacks on Lebanon since the start of the war. Within hours of the ceasefire announcement, Iran responded by saying it would pause Hormuz traffic in retaliation for Israeli attacks in Lebanon. The strait did not reopen. The Pakistani mediators were humiliated, and Trump was left in the middle, caught between his ally, who would not stop, and an Iran that used every Israeli provocation as leverage to keep oil prices high and the strait closed. The tension was now structural. Iran's strategy was coldly rational. As one analyst at the University of South Florida put it, for Tehran, instability is leverage. As long as energy prices remained elevated and the strait remained disrupted, Iran retained one of its few major bargaining cards, and Netanyahu was, whether intentionally or not, handing Iran that leverage every time Israeli jets struck Lebanon. Trump grew visibly frustrated. He reportedly pressured Netanyahu to call off retaliatory strikes. He told NBC News that Israel would be scaling back its attacks on Lebanon, and yet the strikes continued. Israeli forces pushing the southern Lebanon. Bint Jbeil fell almost entirely under Israeli Defense Forces control. Operation Eternal Darkness launched 100 airstrikes in southern Beirut in the span of 10 minutes. The Lebanese government called it a war crime, and through all of it, the Strait of Hormuz stayed closed. This is the context in which Trump boarded Air Force One and flew to Beijing. He did not go to Beijing as a triumphant wartime president. He went as a leader who needed a deal. Any deal that would stabilize energy markets, ease economic pressure on American consumers, and give him leverage in the Iran negotiations. And in my assessment, the oil announcement from the Trump-Xi summit was not primarily an economic agreement. It was a geopolitical signal. By announcing that Chinese ships would sail to Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska to buy American crude, Trump was telling Iran and Netanyahu something profound. He was saying, America has other options. America can supply the world's largest oil importer directly. America does not need the Strait of Hormuz open as badly as you think. And Xi Jinping's own statements at the summit reinforce exactly this message. The White House readout confirmed that Xi expressed interest in purchasing more American oil to reduce China's dependence on the strait in the future. Think about what that means. China, which had been importing approximately 1.4 million barrels per day of Iranian crude as recently as 2025, was now publicly signaling a willingness to shift its energy dependency away from Iran and toward the United States. Xi also told Trump that China would not provide military equipment to Iran, and Trump called that a big statement. Xi confirmed that both leaders agreed the Strait of Hormuz must remain open, and that neither side would tolerate its militarization or the charging of tolls for its use. Iran blocks the strait, China wants the strait open, and now China is buying American oil. You do not need to be a diplomat to understand what that means for Iran's leverage. But here is what this means for Netanyahu. And this is what I want you to think hard about. If Trump successfully builds an energy partnership with China, the world's largest oil consumer, and uses that partnership as a tool to pressure Iran toward a deal, then Netanyahu's vision of a total military victory over Iran becomes something the United States simply will not support, because a deal with Iran means accepting a version of Iran that still exists. Netanyahu has made clear he does not accept that. He told CBS that even diplomacy must be followed by complete dismantlement. He has refused to accept the ceasefire as final. He has continued striking Lebanon. And now, while Trump is in Beijing eating Kung Pao chicken and announcing oil deals and Boeing jet sales and agricultural purchases, Netanyahu is sitting in Jerusalem watching his most important ally shift the center of gravity of global politics away from the Middle East and toward the Pacific. The numbers from the summit tell a story on their own. China agreed to purchase 200 Boeing 737 jets. China committed to buying American soybeans, liquefied natural gas, and crude oil. Trump said he and Xi had made fantastic trade deals. United States crude oil exports to China had collapsed by 95% from 2023 to just 8.4 million barrels for all of 2025, a number that now appears set to reverse dramatically if this deal holds. And China's foreign ministry confirmed that the two leaders reached a series of new consensuses aimed at building constructive strategic stability in the bilateral relationship for the next 3 years and beyond. That is not a trade deal. That is a strategic framework. That is the architecture of a new geopolitical relationship being assembled in real time. Now, and this matters enormously, China has not officially confirmed the energy purchases in its own public statements. Beijing's foreign ministry focused on the broader strategic framework. And analysts have been quick to note that the last time Trump visited China in 2017, he came home with a deal worth more than $250 billion, and China agreed to buy 300 Boeing planes, a deal that was subsequently never fully implemented. This time, the numbers are smaller and the diplomatic caution is greater. Former assessments of Trump-Xi summits have repeatedly described them as tactical truces, not major resets. So, we should be honest. The oil deal may not be as concrete as Trump's Fox News interviews suggested, but the direction of travel, America and China finding shared interest in a stable Middle East and open energy lanes, is real. And that direction is devastating for Netanyahu's maximalist war strategy. What comes next for both leaders politically is where this story gets even more consequential. For Trump, the summit was designed to generate wins he could take back to American voters. Lower energy prices, American oil exports, American jobs in Texas and Louisiana and Alaska. The optics of Chinese ships sailing into American ports to buy American crude is exactly the kind of tangible, visual, America wins moment that Trump has built his political identity around. But if Netanyahu continues to destabilize the ceasefire through Lebanon, and if Iran retaliates by closing the strait again, those oil price gains evaporate instantly. Trump's political interest is now structurally aligned with ending this war, and structurally in tension with Netanyahu's desire to continue it. For Netanyahu, the political calculus is deeply precarious. He is fighting a two-front war, literally and politically. His own coalition contains members who called the ceasefire a mistake. 63% of the Israeli public opposed it. He has declared publicly that the war's goals are not yet achieved. And yet the United States, his indispensable security partner, is now in Beijing cutting energy deals with China, discussing Iran, peace plan frameworks with Xi Jinping, and signaling that it does not need the Strait of Hormuz open at all, in Trump's own words, as much as China does. The leverage that Netanyahu assumed he held over American foreign policy, the assumption that Washington would always follow Jerusalem's lead on Iran, is being quietly dismantled in real time. What this means for Israel's future military support from America is a question that every serious analyst is asking right now. The United States has not withdrawn support from Israel. It has not canceled arms shipments. It has not broken the alliance. But the alignment of interests that drove Operation Epic Fury, the joint conviction that Iran must be completely destroyed before any deal is possible, that alignment is fracturing. Trump wants a deal, Xi wants a deal, the Gulf states want a deal. Pakistan is mediating, and Netanyahu wants to keep fighting. When one partner in a military alliance defines victory differently from everyone else at the table, that alliance does not end. It transforms. And the transformation is already visible in how Trump talks about the war. He has started using the language of economic leverage rather than military dominance. He is selling oil, not bombing enrichment sites. He is dining with Xi, not flying to Tel Aviv. History will remember this week in May 2026 as the week the geopolitical center of the Middle East crisis shifted from Washington, Jerusalem to Washington, Beijing. The week that oil markets moved not because of a new war, but because of a new conversation. The week that a handshake in the Great Hall of the People sent crude futures above $100 a barrel and sent a message to Tehran that China, Iran's biggest oil customer, was now publicly pivoting toward American energy. This is a story that will define the next chapter of the Trump presidency, the Netanyahu government, and the global energy market. And you heard it here first. If this analysis gives you something that you could not get anywhere else, subscribe to this channel right now and hit the bell so that you never miss a breakdown like this one. Share this video with one person who needs to understand what is really happening in the world, because the mainstream conversation is still catching up to what I just walked you through. And as always, I want to be clear that while everything I have presented here is drawn from verified reporting, documented statements, and careful cross-referencing of credible sources, geopolitical situations of this complexity evolve rapidly, and reasonable analysts may interpret the same events differently. The goal of this channel is always to give you the tools to think clearly, not to hand you conclusions. Think carefully. Stay curious. I will see you in the next one.